Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are really jumping into the deep end, Book of Revelation, chapters 12 and 13.
That's right.
We're aiming our focus, really trying to pin down this specific period, the 1260 days. You hear it called a time, times, and half a time.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most debated prophetic timings out there.
Absolutely. So this dive, it's all about getting precise. Who are the players? What's the sequence? When does this cosmic war clock actually start ticking?
Exactly. And for you, the listener, our goal today is really just about knowledge acquisition. We're taking this incredibly dense, symbolic stuff
Very dense.
and pulling out the core timing sequences
Right.
because there are two main views, completely contradictory, actually, on how this all unfolds.
And it all hangs on this one question, doesn't it?
It really does. Does the beast, this power structure, rise during those 1260 days when God's people are supposedly protected? Or does it only show up after that protection ends?
Getting that timing right, well, it changes the entire picture for the saints living through it.
Completely defines their experience.
So our analysis, it's really anchored in just a few key verses, especially how Revelation 12 flows, like immediately into Revelation 13.
Yeah, that transition is everything. It's about reading it sequentially.
Because if it's concurrent versus sequential,
Yeah.
that shifts the whole chronology, right? The first resurrection, what happens during the final judgments, all at once.
Everything. So let's unpack that sequence.
Okay, let's set the stage. Revelation 12. It starts right after this massive spiritual war in heaven.
Right. The dragon, Satan, he's been defeated, cast out. So the heavens are rejoicing.
But there's a catch. Verse 12, a big warning. Woe to the earth and the sea. Why?
Well, because the devil knows his time is short. He's been thrown down. And the source material really emphasizes this shift, from a cosmic fight to a terrestrial one.
He's furious.
Absolutely furious. He knows his window is closing. And verse 13 shows his immediate reaction. He goes straight after the woman who gave birth to the male child.
And this woman,
Rita.
she's symbolic, right?
Yeah.
Represents more than one thing.
Yeah, definitely symbolic layers. Represents ancient Israel who, brought forth Christ. But also the church, the collective body of God's faithful people throughout time. It's a composite figure.
His goal seems to be just total annihilation of this woman.
Wipe her out. But there's instant divine intervention. A protection plan kicks in.
And this is where we hit that critical time element first, verse 14.
Right on cue. The woman gets the means to escape 2 wings of a great eagle. It signifies, divine help, speed, getting her to this special place prepared for her in the wilderness.
A place of safety.
Exactly. And crucially, the verse tells us how long she's kept safe from the serpent's immediate presence for a time, times, and half a time.
Gotcha.
The 1260 prophetic days. This period is specifically about her being protected, nourished, safely away from the dragon's, let's say, direct physical attacks.
But the dragon, he's persistent. He doesn't just give up.
No, he fails to grab her directly, so he tries this catastrophic indirect attack. Spits water like a river out of his mouth after her.
Trying to sweep her away, drown her. Now, this flood, what are the sources suggesting it really is? Doesn't sound like literal water.
Yeah, that's vital context. Prophetic language, right? Waters often mean peoples, nations. Or in a destructive sense like this, it could be overwhelming military force.
Or maybe lies, propaganda.
Exactly. A massive flood of lies, false authority, spiritual chaos designed to just drown the woman's faith, extinguish the church's influence. The sources lean heavily toward that interpretation, a surge of demonic and political power.
And yet, it fails.
Completely fails. Another dramatic intervention. Verse 16 says it plainly. The earth helped the woman.
Oh.
The ground literally opens its mouth and swallows the river. That whole flood of power and lies just gone.
Wow. Okay.
There's a clear statement, really. Throughout those 1260 days, there's some kind of divine countermeasure active, something that just nullifies the dragon's big strategic moves against the collective body of God's people.
So the dragons failed twice now. Cast out of heaven, failed to destroy the protected woman during this 1260-day period.
Right. And this failure, this inability to get the main group, forces him to pivot his strategy. That's verse 17.
And this pivot, this is the hinge point for our whole discussion today, isn't it?
It's everything. Because he, defeated and enraged, leaves the protected woman, turns his focus elsewhere. He goes off to make war with the rest of her offspring.
The rest of her offspring?
Yeah. Who are they and what happens to them? That determines whether the beast's reign happens during or after those 1,260 days.
Okay, so let's nail down this new target group, the rest of her offspring. They aren't just random followers, are they?
No, verse 17 is very specific. It defines them by two key characteristics. They keep the commandments of God, and they have the testimony of Jesus Christ.
So active obedience and active witness.
Precisely. They're the faithful remnant, the ones holding on to their complete spiritual allegiance, even when the dragon is breathing down their necks.
And right after the dragon turns to fight them, what happens?
The sequence is instantaneous, almost jarring. Revelation 13, verse 1. John's vision shifts immediately. He sees the beast rising from the sea.
So dragon targets the offspring.
And then the beast, the instrument the dragon will use for this war, appears. The timing is critical. Target identified, weapon deployed.
And this beast, it's described graphically. 7 heads, 10 horns, global political power.
That's the common interpretation, yes.
Yeah.
Systems of government. 10 crowns on the horns, signifying sovereignty, but it's a corrupt sovereignty because it's covered in blasphemous names.
Empowered by the dragon herself.
Definitely. Ready to wage this physical war against those remaining saints.
Okay, so here's the core issue, the central debate we mentioned.
This is it.
We have the woman protected for 1,260 days in chapter 12.
Right.
Then we have the dragon turning to fight the remaining offspring, using this beast that just rose up in chapter 13.
Yep.
Now, the beast is also given authority for 42 months, which is also 1,260 days.
Exactly the same duration.
So, does the beast's 1,260-day reign happen at the same time as the woman's 1,260 days of protection, concurrently?
Or does the woman's protection period finish first, the 1,260 days end, and then the beast rises and starts his 1,260-day war, sequentially?
That distinction changes everything.
Yeah.
And figuring out who these remaining offspring are seems key to solving it.
It really does. Our sources point to a couple of main interpretations for this remnant group.
Like what?
Well, view A suggests they might be a very specific group, like the 144,000 the sealed, protected messengers, often seen as first fruits.
Okay, a special forces unit almost?
Kinda. But view B, which the source material we're looking at tends to support, sees them more broadly.
How so?
As essentially all believers who maintain their commitment to Christ during this time, defined by their willingness to face martyrdom rather than worship the beast, they are the active witnesses, the ones refusing the mark.
Right. Because if the dragon is making war against them, that implies real conflict, pressure, maybe death.
Exactly. Coercion, persecution.
Okay, so let's explore the first possibility then. View 1. The sequential timeline. The idea that the big conflict only happens after the initial protection period.
All right, view 1. Its core idea is separation. It argues that the events of Revelation 13, the beast, the false prophet, forcing the 666 mark, all of that happens only after the woman's initial 1,260 days of protection are totally finished.
So it pushes the main conflict, the beast's reign, into the second half of that final prophetic period, whatever that period is.
Precisely. The first 1,260 days are, under this view, relatively quiet for God's people collectively. They're safe, nourished. The beast's global power isn't fully active yet, or at least it isn't forcing worship.
Then bam, midpoint. The 1,260 days end, the dragon is maybe fully thrown down in some sense, the beast rises, and the war begins. It relies on keeping these periods strictly separate.
And if you follow that strict separation logic, a couple of things must be true during that initial 1,260-day phase.
Okay, what?
First, no active global targeted war by the dragon against these remaining saints. They aren't under that specific pressure yet.
And
Second, and this is probably the most critical point for this view, the beast system hasn't risen to full power, and crucially, the mandatory enforcement of the 666 mark is not happening.
So no mark of the beast requirement during those first 1,260 days.
According to view 1, no. That pressure, that global demand for allegiance, only kicks in after the first 1,260 days are over.
Okay, pause right there, because this sequential model, it seems to immediately run into some, well, pretty big problems when you line it up with other major end-time events.
Huge logical hurdles. Theological ones, too.
Let's start with the big one.
Yeah.
The first resurrection. Critical implication number 1.
Right. The first resurrection is a massive event. The sources consistently place it often right at the end of that 1,260-day period, or maybe the midpoint of the final week.
And it's a specific resurrection, isn't it?
Very specific. It's singular, first of all, not repeated. And it's for the true saints, the ones worthy to enter Christ's millennial kingdom. And the definition of worthiness here really emphasizes the martyrdom witnesses.
Those who refuse the beast.
Refuse the beast. gave their lives, or at least their unwavering testimony for Christ, under that ultimate pressure.
Okay. So if the first resurrection happens right when the 1260 days end,
Yep.
and it gathers all the true witnesses,
Right.
but according to view one, the beast and the mark only show up after that point, then who exactly got martyred during the first 1260 days?
That's the massive hole in view one. If the mandatory worship and the 666 mark haven't been enforced yet, then essentially no saints would have faced that specific test and become martyrdom witnesses in that sense during the first period.
So they'd still be alive on Earth, untested by the beast.
Exactly. They'd still be here when the first resurrection supposedly happens. They wouldn't qualify under the martyr definition tied to resisting the beast.
So the first resurrection occurs, maybe it picks up people who died naturally or from other causes. But the vast majority of living saints, those who were protected or just hadn't faced the mark test yet, they get left behind.
Left behind on an earth that has just seen the rise of the fully empowered, absolutely furious beast system, according to this view.
And then they would face the mark, the persecution, the martyrdom during the second half.
Precisely. Which leads to the unavoidable problem. To gather these saints, the ones martyred in the second half, view one requires the first resurrection, which the sources treat as a single definitive event to happen twice, or maybe even more times.
Once at the 1260-day mark for whoever died before, and then again later for the main group martyred under the beast.
Yeah. It completely fragments this unified climactic resurrection event. The sources point to one great gathering, one trumpet call. This view shatters that.
That timing issue with the resurrection alone seems pretty devastating for view one.
It's a major structural collapse.
But there's a second big problem too, right? Critical implication too. Something about logistics during judgment.
Right. Think about what else is supposed to be happening during that latter half, the period after the 1260 days.
That's when view one says the beast is finally active, forcing the mark.
Yes, but what else kicks off then? The 7 plagues, the 7 bowls of God's wrath. And these plagues, they're poured out after the saints are supposedly gathered in that first resurrection. And they're specifically targeted judgments against beast worshippers, those who took the mark.
So, view one has the beast trying to enforce global compliance,
demanding everyone take the mark, punishing dissent with death.
while the very system doing the enforcing, the beast's global political and economic structure, is being hammered by divine plagues. Sores, seas turning to blood, darkness.
Exactly. It creates this impossible scenario. How can the beast successfully compel worldwide allegiance and manage the logistics of identifying and punishing non-compliance?
Yeah, tracking everyone, controlling buying and selling.
When the very infrastructure needed for that control is literally collapsing under God's wrath. How do you enforce a global economic mark when the economy is being destroyed and your own followers are suffering hideous plagues?
It just doesn't seem feasible. The beast needs maximum power and control to enforce the mark.
Right. The plagues are designed to destroy the system that enforces the mark. Logically, the enforcement period, the time when the beast successfully demands allegiance and people make their choice, has to happen before those system-destroying plagues begin.
So the enforcement has to be during the first 1260 days, not the second half when judgment falls.
View 1, the sequential model, just doesn't hold up. It forces a fractured resurrection and demands the beast operate effectively under conditions designed to cripple it. It fails basic internal consistency.
Okay, so if view one has these major problems, let's turn to view two. This one argues for concurrency, right? Integration.
Exactly. View 2 says the conflict, the battle described in Revelation 13, happens during the initial 1260 days.
So that whole period, the time, times, and half a time, is simultaneously the time of the woman's protection and the time of the beast's reign and the enforcement of the mark.
That's the core thesis. We call it the concurrence principle. The beast rises, gets his 42 months of authority, and the pressure to take the 666 mark begins right at the start of the 1260 days. The whole period is the time of testing, conflict, coercion.
All right, now hold on. This is where I had the question earlier. If the woman, the collective people of God, is protected and nourished in the wilderness for those 1260 days,
Revelation 12.1, yes.
how can the remaining offspring, who are part of that same group, be simultaneously under attack, facing war and martyrdom during the exact same 1260 days? It sounds contradictory on the surface.
It does, and that's the key interpretive challenge view 2 has to resolve. And it does by redefining or clarifying the nature of the protection itself.
Okay. How?
The 1260 days is the time of protection for the woman, absolutely. But view 2 argues that protection isn't necessarily about physical removal for every single believer. It's about active spiritual defense, There's a mechanism shielding them.
A mechanism active while the beast is also active. What is it?
This is where Revelation 11 becomes crucial. The ministry of the two witnesses.
Ah, right. They prophesy for
Precisely 1,260 days, the exact same period.
Okay.
So view 2 interprets the protection given to the woman, the saints, as the spiritual and even physical defense provided by the power of these two witnesses. Often, they're identified with the 144,000, the sealed servants of God.
So the witnesses are the shield. Let's talk about their power, because that would have to counter that dragon's flood attack we discussed earlier.
It has to, and it does. The
Wow.
witnesses are given incredible, frankly terrifying power. They can stop rain, turn water to blood, and most importantly here, if anyone tries to harm them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies.
Wow. Okay, that's serious defense.
It's a supernatural deterrent. So when the dragon spits out that water like a river, that flood of lies, military force, political pressure,
Yeah.
it's the witnesses' power, their authoritative preaching of the gospel, the judgments tied to their ministry that effectively causes the earth to swallow the flood. Their fiery defense neutralizes the dragon's attempt to sweep the faithful away.
So the woman, the church, is protected through the active ministry of the witnesses during those 1260 days, even while the beast rages.
Exactly. They're the active shield. And therefore, Revelation 13, which details the beast rising and making war on the saints, isn't describing a later period. It's giving us the details, the blow-by-blow of the conflict happening during the 1260 days, while the witnesses' protection is active.
Okay, that connects the chapters. So the remaining offspring, then, are specifically those believers being targeted by the beast during this 1260-day window, while the witnesses are active.
Yes, they are defined by their resistance to the mark. Revelation 13.7 says the beast makes war with the saints and overcomes some of them. These are the ones facing the direct pressure.
And what happens to them during this time?
They basically fall into two groups, both defined by refusing the mark. Some are martyred, they're killed for their testimony. Others, perhaps miraculously protected, maybe through the witness's intervention or other means, survive physically until the end of the 1260 days.
But crucially, the sources, under this view, see both groups, the ones who die and the ones who survive, but refuse the mark as fundamentally the same category, right?
That's the essential synthesis in view 2. They're all considered martyrdom witnesses.
Why?
Because the defining act is the refusal of the mark, the unwavering witness or testimony against the beast's authority. Whether you sealed that testimony with your blood or were kept alive through it, you maintained your allegiance. Martyrdom in this sense points to the witness itself, martyrs in Greek, not strictly the death.
So anyone who successfully resists the beast's ultimate demand during the 1260 days is judged worthy of the first resurrection.
Correct, whether they died in the process or survived it.
Which means the first resurrection, when it happens at the end of the 1260 days.
Doesn't just raise the dead witnesses, it also simultaneously transforms the living witnesses who refuse the mark.
Bringing the whole testing period to one single unified climax.
Exactly. A single, comprehensive gathering event. The 1260 days functions as the period of the ultimate loyalty test, when the beast has his allotted time. When that time expires, the divine reckoning happens and everyone who passed the test is gathered.
Okay, let's quickly recap the timeline that View 2 establishes, because it seems much cleaner.
Right, 1260 days begin. The beast rises, the mark is enforced globally.
Simultaneously, the 144,000 or two witnesses are active, warning the world, maybe providing some protection.
Conflict is real. Persecution against the remaining offspring. Those refusing the mark is happening. Some die, some survive.
But all who refuse are accumulating this status,
Yeah.
martyrdom witnesses.
Now, for the crucial transition, the part that really seals the logic for View 2.
The end of the 1260 days.
Exactly. When that period concludes, the first resurrection occurs. This is the big event. Think 1 Thessalonians 4.16. The Lord descends, the shout, the trumpet, the dead in Christ rise first.
But it's not just the dead.
Not according to this view. It's also the moment the living saints, those martyrdom witnesses who survived, are instantaneously changed, transformed in the twinkling of an eye, and gathered up.
So all the martyrdom witnesses, dead and living, everyone who refused the 666 mark, are resurrected and transformed.
Together in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, they ascend, they leave the earth.
Okay, so picture this. The 1260 days are over. The first resurrection rapture has just happened. What is the state of planet Earth immediately after that event, as the second half of the final period begins?
This is the absolute key point, the one View 2 resolves perfectly. After the first resurrection, the earth is essentially spiritually cleansed of the righteous. It contains only beast worshippers.
Saints left.
No saints left on earth. They've all been gathered, which is precisely why the final 7 plays, the 7 bowls of God's undiluted wrath, are then poured out.
Because there's no risk of harming the righteous.
Exactly. The plagues aren't for the saints. The sources are clear. They're judgments upon the beast worshippers who consciously chose allegiance to the dragon system and remained after the faithful were removed.
Your logic flows perfectly now. The saints don't need protection during the second half. They don't need to flee. They aren't fighting the beast anymore.
Because they're already safe. They're gathered, maybe pictured on that sea of glass mentioned in Revelation, singing the Song of the Lamb, having successfully passed through the Great Tribulation, the 1260-day testing period.
That absence of the saints during the plagues feels really critical. View 1 had them potentially still on Earth, facing martyrdom during the plagues.
Which creates that impossible scenario and contradicts the targeted nature of God's final wrath. View 2 keeps the judgment pure. It falls only on those who took the mark.
And what about the end of the evil system itself during this final phase, the pouring out of the wrath?
Well, the 7 plagues cause massive devastation and death among the wicked. But then there's a final act of self-destruction, almost. The Red Beast. The final global political military power structure turns violently against the harlot.
The harlot being Babylon, the corrupt religious system.
That's the common interpretation, yes.
Yeah.
The false religious system may be a globalized papal power or something similar that initially rode the beast, supported its rise. Now, the political power turns on its former religious partner.
And destroys her.
Utterly. The text says they eat her flesh and burn her with fire. It's judgment falling not just on the people, but on the corrupt power structures themselves, completing the demolition of the dragon's kingdom on earth right before Christ returns in glory. #tag outro.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive really highlights how critical nailing down the timing is. It's the battleground for interpretation.
Definitely.
We looked at view 1, the sequential model, and saw how it creates these significant paradoxes, especially with the first resurrection needing to happen multiple times and the beast trying to rule during the plagues.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem to align smoothly with the other prophetic puzzle pieces.
But then view 2, the concurrent model, seems to resolve those issues. It paints the beast's 1260-day reign as the great test, the period of martyrdom witness.
Culminating in that single, unified first resurrection event that removes all the true witnesses from earth.
Leaving the second half purely for God's targeted judgment, the plagues falling only on the wicked, the timeline clicks into place much more logically.
It does seem to offer a more coherent reading of the sequence presented in Revelation 12 and 13.
So as we wrap up, let's circle back to Revelation 12.7. Those remaining offspring, defined as those who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ.
Right, their defining characteristics.
If view 2 is correct, and their worthiness for the first resurrection comes from this active obedience and testimony during the 1260 days, it leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it?
I think it does. A provocative one for you to consider. If some of these offspring are protected, if they survive the 1260 days physically because of, say, the witness's shield, their qualification for the first resurrection wasn't sealed by death. It was sealed by their readiness to refuse the mark, their internal state of obedience and testimony.
So the question becomes about the nature of that readiness.
Exactly. How deeply must that refusal of worldly compromise, that commitment to God's commands and Christ's testimony, be ingrained in the faith of the seed of the woman to make them worthy of that final transformation, even if they were spared the executioner's axe? What does that level of preparedness look like internally? That distinction between mere physical survival and true spiritual worthiness, that might be the heart of what defines them.
A very powerful point to reflect on. The internal state matching the external possibility of martyrdom. Thank you for guiding us through this incredibly complex but absolutely vital piece of prophetic timing.
My pleasure. It's crucial stuff to grapple with.